want to dig into those economic issues with CBS correspondent Kelly O'Grady, who joins us now. Kelly, good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
I know we've been doing an analysis here at CBS. So what would that cost be to do this mass deportation?
So at the broadest level, over the past 5 years, it cost about $19,600 to deport one undocumented person. So if we broaden that out to 11 million possible deportations, you're looking at something over $200 billion. Now, of course, that's not all going to happen at once, right? But you start to think about, okay, you have all of these different industries, as Nancy mentioned, agriculture, hospitality, construction. Think about the reconstruction of everything that's happening in Los Angeles, right? All of those workers that aren't going to be there if you were going to reach the point where we are deporting those people. Of course, President Trump is likely going to start with those with a criminal record. But on the other flip side, there's also the drawing less on resources. So housing, right? There's food stamps, things that these undocumented workers are drawing on right now. So it's kind of a push and a pull, and it's all about how long it would take to go through with this deportation process. But you really have to think about the impacts to inflation, because you could see prices rise from all of that lost work. The other thing is, okay, yes, the argument is, well, that would mean more U.S. jobs, but you have to pay U.S. workers more. The average minimum wage for someone in California working on a farm, it's $15. Some of these undocumented workers, they make 5 to 35% less because they don't have the leverage to ask for that minimum wage.
Did you say close to 19,000, or are you saying 9,000?
19,000.
Close to $20,000.
$20,000,
Wow.
That's correct.
Per person.
It's a good point on the guest workers who are allowed to come in. Richard Escobedo on our team was just saying a quarter of all guest workers in the U.S. are in the two states of Florida and Georgia, two Republican states. But on the question, Nora, you raised about cost and immediate cost, we know this promises of immediate action, but it again is constrained by the existing resources. There are 41,000 detention beds Immigration and Customs Enforcement has right now. Over 38,000 of them are currently filled. So when you have 1.4 million people with court orders of removal against them, that's one of the criticisms of the Biden administration is, why didn't they remove them? Their defense is, oh, we prioritize those with criminal records who would be a risk to safety. How does the Trump administration define criminal when they say that? So we don't really know the number. They throw around 1 million. Lindsey Graham, the senator who on the Budget Committee is negotiating with Stephen Miller to work with the Trump administration on this, told us just yesterday he's working with $100 billion. That's what they want to put together in this Senate package that they want to get passed immediately, but really probably looks like the spring, to give resources to do all this. So the promise of shock and awe may be the paper rather than the raids, although those are promised, because the other question is, where do you send people? The executive orders we got today saying that they're going to focus on two gangs, MS-13 from El Salvador and a gang out of Venezuela. Venezuela doesn't accept deportations right now. So if you round up these gangs, where do you send them back to? And Mike Walls, the national security advisor, said they're trying to negotiate to find another country to take in people who are documented criminals. So there's a lot that still has to be worked out policy-wise to deliver on these things.
But Robert Costa, in your conversations with the president and his close advisors and Stephen Miller, this is his goal. He is a deputy White House chief of staff. He's going to be the Homeland Security advisor inside the White House. That is a big job. This is priority number one. They promised this to their supporters and the people. Do they have to deliver quickly?
On day one, not just priority number one, but on day one, they said they were going to do something.
It's not just a priority, it's a passion for this crew. I remember going to see Stephen Miller at Johnny Halfshell, this restaurant that doesn't even exist on Capitol Hill anymore. He'd be huddling there when he was a Senate staffer for Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama, plotting out conservative policies on the border, never imagining they'd have this opportunity to go to this length when it comes to immigration policy. I was with Senator Sessions when he first met with Donald Trump in 2015 in Mobile, Alabama. And what were they talking about when they convened on his plane? immigration. They had grand plans over a decade ago for what could be possible. Now, Stephen Miller is perhaps one of the most powerful unelected people in this country. He will be Deputy White House Chief of Staff, and he'll be working with the border czar, with the Chief of Staff, with the head of DHS to use executive power as much as possible to put into motion President Trump's vision. When I spoke to President Trump over the weekend, but especially on Election Day, he said immigration is everything in terms of his victory. And I said, well, what about the economy? He said, of course, that's a big issue, but he truly believes immigration is why he's back, and that's why he's pursuing it with such vigor.
I want to go back and show and keep up the pictures of live inside the Capital One Arena where that program is underway, and we are going to hear more from the President of the United States and his supporters, and where I think he's going to talk more about those immigration orders and that passion that the President and his supporters have for this crackdown on immigration that was the centerpiece in many ways of his election campaign. And Kelly, I want to use your economic expertise while you're here as well to talk about Bitcoin. We saw it surge, of course, and then fall back. We saw the President of the United States, as well as Melania Trump, issuing their own Bitcoin. What are the legalities of that? How much money have they made?
Billions and billions of dollars. And the really interesting thing, I like to liken these meme coins to what we saw happen with Donald Trump's stock, right? DJT. You saw that trade with the volatility of his popularity and the chances that he might win this election over the past few months. And so you saw supporters just throw their money into that, and it would soar, and then it would also fall. And so you saw that happen with the meme coins the other night. I mean, billions and billions of dollars. But what I will also broaden out to this cryptocurrency space, I mean, I know a lot of folks think of this as, oh, you know, it's this kind of dark magic kind of thing. It has gained in popularity a lot, Bitcoin specifically. And 1 in 5 Americans now own Bitcoin.
But there's a difference between Bitcoin and meme coins.
Exactly. And
Bitcoin
that
is actually tied to something, memes are not. But
right. And so you could see if people sell this, you know,
Right.
I guess, yeah.
I mean, we're getting pretty loosey-goosey here.
Sorry, but we'll let Kelly explain. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Kelly. Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair. But these meme coins, I think that's where really this is just people trading. I like Donald Trump. I like President Trump. I'm going to throw my money in. And you've seen kind of happen with these celebrity meme coins where the celebrity will sell and then people lose everything. And so that's going to be kind of really interesting. I think this also could trade with how people feel he's approaching the crypto industry. Is he making good on those promises?
Part of that is pulling back regulation, and that is something that Donald Trump ran on during the campaign. And the crypto space was very upset with how the now former SEC chair, Gary Gensler, prosecuted to have them regulated as if they were more like a stock. But it's unusual. We have now, for the first time in American history, a crypto czar, David Sachs, a South African immigrant to this country, who has promised to open that up, and AI, artificial intelligence, and promising big tech. You won't see as much regulation as you saw under the last administration. And I think this is going to be a real interesting area to watch because there's tension even within the administration. You have J.D. Vance, who came from the, helping to fund startup world, and he says he likes little tech. He doesn't like big tech. So he'd tell you he doesn't like Tim Cook and those other big tech giants in the room.
They're in the front row.
In the front row. Yes, fair.
Have we ever had a president that had seen such a fast turnaround from a policy choice to dollars in some kind of currency, whether it's a made-up one or a real one or whatever? But that kind of fast call and response in a market is amazing.
Incredible. Kelly O'Grady, thank you so much.